I just spend a lot of time playing the guitar, and if there's a new technique or something that I want to learn or want to pick up on, I'll focus on that for a while. But I've never really had to schedule that part of my life. It's just always been what I did when I didn't have anything else I had to do. I think that's at the heart of it. Really, that's a big part of what people call talent. For me, it was enjoying the repetition of playing the guitar so much that I developed pretty quickly with it. I think somebody can be really, really talented, but if you don't enjoy sitting down and playing by yourself on an instrument for long hours at a time, you're never going to get really very good at it. And that was what I was most fortunate to be born with. Is I just enjoyed playing the guitar, and I liked it so much, even when I was no good at it, that I would keep doing it until I got better. I grew up in Alabama. My grandfather was a Pentecostal preacher. He played guitar, mostly gospel, bluegrass kind of stuff. But my dad's brother, my uncle, was into rock and roll music and also was into the Chet Atkins, Merle Travis style of picking, which is something that I really enjoyed a whole lot from early on. I've never been really, really good at it. Most of the things that you'll see are styles that I didn't follow all the way through. I think maybe my attention span gave out. I learned a little bit of each style and then went on to something else. But this one was a big deal for me from the time I was probably 7 or 8 years old. I remember my uncle would play this, and he was a lot better with his thumb than I am, so I did more of a hybrid picking style of it. But you'll get the point, I think. And this is the Bells of St. Mary's, the Chet Atkins version. So yeah, I didn't really go on to make that style of music, but it certainly helped out with my songwriting. When it came time to write more singer-songwriter type stuff, and I was depending on an acoustic guitar to accompany myself, having a little bit of an understanding of the alternating thumb picking patterns really helped me out a whole lot. So this song here, Neil Young's Cortez the Killer, was another one that I learned from my uncle, my dad's little brother, who taught me a whole lot about playing guitar. This one really appealed to me early on for a couple of reasons. The primary reason was that the melody to the song was reflected in the chords, so it wasn't like there was a lead guitar part and a rhythm guitar part. I think Neil Young did that a whole lot, especially on things that he played acoustic. But Cortez was a really cool one to me because you could hear the melody as it was being played along with the chords, and also the chord changes, the melody carried over from one chord to the next, so it created this kind of a suspension that, I didn't know what that was at the time. I just thought it sounded cool, but when I started coming up with melodies and chord changes on my own, this one sort of kept coming back to me because of the tension and release that was created when he would hold that D note as he went from one chord to the next. So I'll play a little bit of it for you. that note right there that always really appealed to me. That D, how it held over, and then the progression sort of cycled back around, with that D note being a remnant of the end of the progression before. I think that's just a really beautiful song, and the melody and the chords work so well together that you can very easily play that just on one acoustic guitar, and you don't feel like anything's really missing. I think that's the sign of a really good song. Among bluegrass and gospel songs and Chet Atkins songs in my house, there was a big love of Leonard Skinner, early pre-plane crash Leonard Skinner, and especially the guitar playing of Steve Gaines, who I think was one of the most talented guitar players that ever lived, probably. And he had a short time to prove it, but he definitely did. The first song that I ever learned how to play on electric guitar was Simple Man, but the one that I'm going to talk about today is I Know a Little, which is it's incredibly complicated from a lead guitar standpoint, especially to be considered Southern rock. You know, in those days, a lot of Southern rock was based off big riffs and really sort of slow-moving guitar until you got to the solos. But Skinner took a lot of pride in playing things that were very complicated, very difficult to pull off. And this song was most certainly one of those. I spent a whole lot of years just listening to it before I ever tried to take the time to learn how to play it. But the intro to that blew my mind when I was 8 years old, and it still does. Let me see if I can remember it here. Dabbler in bluegrass flat picking, and I thought I had a little bit of a handle on it before I moved to Nashville, and then discovered that the guy that's checking you out in line at the grocery store is probably a better bluegrass flat picker than you are. That's just how it goes. But I did spend a little bit of time studying that stuff when I grew up, because my grandfather played, like I had mentioned before, old gospel songs, and he, from a very early age, he would have me play rhythm guitar for him while he played what he called a lead instrument, like a mandolin or a banjo or fiddle or something. And so I started to get interested in bluegrass music that way. And one thing that I don't really do right is, my right hand, which I think for a lot of players, I've heard Brian Sutton say that your fingernails are supposed to rest right on where your pick guard sits right there, and nothing's really supposed to be in contact with the top. I think a lot of those techniques were in order to get the fastest picking technique and the loudest picking technique that you could get, but I don't really do that right. I sort of have my own bastardized version of it. But one song that I've always liked that I learned many years ago is Salt Creek, the Bill Monroe and the Bluegrass Boys version of Salt Creek. Let me see if I can remember how to do it. I'd be making a mistake if I didn't talk about slide guitar at least a little bit on this, because that has been a huge part of my guitar playing technique and just my musical style over the years. One thing that really, I started out playing slide guitar listening to people like Duane Allman, and then going back and listening to Elmore James and learning a lot of blues-based licks. But then when I heard the way David Lindley played lap steel, especially on the Jackson Browne albums, the first few Jackson Browne albums, the early 70s, that David Lindley played on and was featured on pretty prominently, that's when I really started to understand that it could be approached melodically in a way that a lot of instruments couldn't, because there's so much of a vocal quality to the slide guitar, and you don't have the you don't have the frets in your way. You can make it really sound like somebody singing a melody, which I thought was really beautiful. And a solo that really moved me was the Running on Empty solo from the record of the same name, and I think they recorded that live at, I think it was at Merriweather Post Pavilion where they did it. But Lindley never seemed to play things exactly the same way twice. And still he was able to bookend the solo and make a real statement, make like a small song within a song, and that really appealed to me. Yeah, I'm going to try to play this out of the key of G rather than the original key of A, because on the lap steel you can reach a whole lot higher than you can on this one. I remember hearing that and thinking that sounded like another song. It sounded like a complete melody, and that really opened my eyes to a different way of playing the slide guitar that wasn't just based off of standard licks that I'd heard in blues music.